Hello again and welcome to the Linux Swithblade Multi-Boot USB. Today we will be looking at the chmod command. It comes from the words change mode and is used for changing file and folder permissions. Linux, being a Unix-like operating system, handles file permissions in the same way by separating rights between three groups: users, groups, and others. User or owner is the owner of the file. Group refers to a user who is a member of the group to which the file belongs to. Other refers to any other user who is not the owner or a member of the group. The permissions determine what kind of actions a user is allowed to perform on the file. The command is executed by typing chmod u for user equals to r for read, w for write, and x for execute, comma, g for group equals to r and x, comma, o for other equals to r, and then the name of the file which permission you want to change. On the basis of this command, the permissions of the file are as follows. The owner or user is permitted to read, write, and execute the file. In other words, reading a file means that a file can be opened and viewed. Writing a file refers to the ability to modify the file and then save the changes you have made to it. And executing the file is the ability to open a file in such a way that its code starts running and the file begins its own internal processes. A simple example of executing a file would be that of opening a web browser. As soon as you click the icon, the program begins loading all the required files and scripts, and then sets up the browser window for you. Once the chmod command has been executed, you can check to see that the file permissions have been changed correctly by listing the files with their permissions through the ls-lha command. Instead of the letters R, W, and X, file permissions can be set by the octal permission representation. Permissions are expressed through numbers ranging from 0 to 7 according to this chart. Number 0 denies a user any kind of access to the file. Number 1 grants permissions to execute the file. Number 2 permits users to write changes to the file. Number 3 is a combination of number 1 and number 2, which permits writing and executing the file. Number 4 allows you to read the file. Number 5 is a combination of number 1 and number 4, and thus permits a user to read and execute the file. Number 6 combines number 2 and number 4, allowing the user to read the file and write changes to it. Number 7 is the combination of numbers 1, 2, and 4, and therefore permits the user to read, write, and execute the file. File permissions are the first line of defense against security breaches in Unix and Linux systems. For this reason, it is very important that file permissions are set up correctly. If unauthorized users are allowed to write or execute files, the consequences can be disastrous. Start by typing ls-lha. This is an expanded version of the ls command. What this does is not only lists the contents of the directory, but it also lists all the hidden files as well as the permissions of each file and folder. Now, as we begin to change file permissions, it is essential that we know what permissions a specific file has. We have many files and folders here. The downloads directory has read, write, and execute permissions for the owner, execute and read permissions for the group, and execute permission for others. When changing file permissions, we are required to start by typing in the sudo command, which gives us root or administrator privileges. Then we type in chmod u for user equals to r, w, x for read, write, and execute, comma, g for group equals to r and w, comma, o for other equals to r. Then type in the name of the file or folder, in this case, downloads. If the file were in a subdirectory, we would have to specify the path of the file or folder all the way from the root directory. Now, as you relist the items through the ls-lha command, you can see that the permissions of the folder have been changed. Now let's do the same with the octal representation. Take administrator privileges by typing in sudo, then again chmod Remember that in the octal representation, the numbers are formed through combinations. Full permissions, that is read, write and execute, is formed by 1 plus 2 plus 4, which is 7. We assign this to the owner or user by typing it as the first number. Recall that the permissions are set in the order of user, then group, and lastly other. Okay, then we want to assign read and write permissions to the group. That is number 6, which is the combination of number 2 plus number 4. For others, we set the permission as read only, and therefore we type in number 4. Then type in the name of the file or folder. In this case, we will choose the folder Documents. Now when we list the files again, we can see the changed permissions. Alright, lastly, let's add execute functions to all users for a particular file. Sudo chmod +x for execute and the file name, which in this case is .profile. Now when we list the files, we can see the changed permissions, and also the file has been color-coded with green because we have made the file executable. Alright, now you already have a good grasp of how to use the terminal through these commands. The more commands you know, the more you can use them together to execute increasingly complex tasks. Later, when you feel at home with the terminal, you can attempt to learn Bash scripting, which can be used for many different purposes, such as automating tasks. Alright, this was everything for today's lesson. Thanks for joining us and see you again next time.